Hello. Welcome to the Untangled Faith podcast. I'm so glad that you're here.
I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
I have a whole list of questions. I started my list and then I saw the list that your publicist had put together and they overlapped considerably. So I'm feeling pretty good
That's
about
great. Let's do
this.
it. I promise
You
I don't have them memorized.
you have well, and because you have told me that like this is your first official interview, at least I have the benefit of you having not answered these questions 50 times already. So you're
Never.
fresh and excited about answering these questions. You have a book coming out in 4 days.
Hmm.
Gods of the Smoke Machine, Power, Pain, and the Rise of Christian Nationalism in the Megachurch. That is a lot of words per sentence.
Big title.
And tell us about why. Why did you decide to write this book? What was your personal interest in it? Either was it just timing or your life experience or both?
It was both. And so I grew up in a large church. I don't know if it would meet the statistical definition of a megachurch, but in Birmingham, I grew up in a large church and have family who go to large churches, friends who are in large churches. So was definitely familiar with that world, kind of grew up immersed in that world. And then now, I mean, obviously the timing I think is really interesting for a lot of reasons. And I think kind of the prevailing narrative about evangelicalism in the US is that numbers are shrinking. I think we've kind of all seen these numbers. It's a little squirrely to get hard data on this stuff, but the megachurches are growing. Like the median megachurch grew 10% from 2015 to 2020. And so I was naturally curious about that. Like, why? What is causing megachurches to carve out a bigger slice of the pie within evangelicalism? So as we got into it, really to me, the personal stories are what made the project so rich and interesting and difficult at times because it became a story about power, which is
Yeah.
what I think is kind of the overall, trend that I saw in the churches that I was reporting on.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to miss that mega churches are becoming more mega. Even as you kind of talk about how they look different than they did maybe in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
There's more multi-site things happening than we used to see, like everybody gathering in one big campus.
The model is really wildly different than it was back in the 80s and 90s. These churches just look really different, which I thought was just interesting.
Yeah. So religion news journalist Bob Smietana wrote a book. It's on my shelf behind me, one of those like light blue books called Reorganized Religion. And he kind of addressed the idea that attendance in general is trending downward at churches. But also he acknowledged, like what you're saying, is that while that is happening overall, like the people that are in churches are consolidating into fewer. So they're more likely to be in a mega church. And so I think that can be why you said, the data feels kind of squirrely because if you talk to one person, they're like, yeah, attendance is down. But if you talk to the mega pastor, they're like, what are you talking about? People have never been more interested and
Yeah.
excited about church.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so I think what's really interesting about mega churches is that these largest churches, the model is so different. So I think the number, like in 2000, the beginning of the century, 77% of megachurches were that big building, the building that I
Mhm.
grew up in the 80s and 90s. It had a steeple on it. You could fit 3,000 people in the auditorium. There were pews. By 2020, they had completely flipped. Only 30% of megachurches were that model, which means 70% were this franchise model. And so there's some churches that I was able to get into in reporting for the book where they have 12, 18, 25 locations across,
Yeah.
one state. There's a church in Phoenix, Christ Church of the Valley, CCV. They have, I think, 25 locations. No, 18. Sorry, they have 18 locations just across Phoenix. And I went to one last fall and there were probably 150 people in the building with me. And you would have, if I hadn't known what that church looked like, I would have never known that it was a church of 40,000 people, right? So it just looks really different. That has huge implications, I think, for what we look for out of church. It has huge implications for small church pastors who are pastoring near these churches that just show
Mhm.
up. So it's just really interesting.
Yeah, I saw something, I used to be on Twitter, now X. It is it's not as good of it's more of a wasteland of terribleness now than it used to
Yeah.
be maybe 10 years ago. But I followed some local pastors and I saw a local pastor tweet, "Hey, does anybody know of any struggling churches with a building?"
Mm.
And the thing was he was looking for a building. He wanted
Yeah.
their building.
Yeah.
He didn't want to help them. He wanted
That's
their building.
So the CCV location that I went to was a church that had gone under. I mean,
Yeah.
so like the cannibalization of churches, I mean, that's one of the reasons I think that megachurches have grown so rapidly is because I think COVID had a lot to do with this. So a lot of churches closed during COVID, and the megachurches, they were really built for COVID. They had online platforms. You could give tithes and offerings online. You don't have to leave your house to attend a megachurch. And so when First Baptist Church population 150 goes under because of the pandemic, a big megachurch can swoop right in and pay cash for the building, and then they have their 18th location. So that's not surprising to hear.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel conflicted about it. I mean, some people think this was we helped them out. We bought out their mortgage or we did their XYZ because they were struggling. But I think the people that are there that are the original attenders of that church, they don't always realize what's going to happen next. It's
Yeah.
like their church doesn't exist anymore. Even if they
Yeah.
say they
Yeah.
do.
I mean, it's kind of like that old axiom, if you replace every piece of a boat, is it the same boat or is it a different boat, right?
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
if you replace every piece of a church and rename it and bring in new leadership, but the congregation is the same, is it the same church or is it a different church? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tricky. And there are, I think, some unique bad things about having people spread out amongst fewer churches. As you think about, my pastor that was terrible, we probably had close to 1,000 people at the church at that time,
Hmm.
but so 1,000 people were impacted. If it had been
Yeah.
5,000, you have even more people that are like, oh, so this is what it's like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, everyone's familiar with the megachurch scandals that have happened in the last decade. You've got guys like Bill Hybels, of course, Ted Haggard, and Mark Driscoll. And so when these guys have something happen, if they commit a misconduct or pastoral abuse or something, and the church closes, or you know, tens of thousands of people can be affected all at once. And I think that is a unique dynamic to a megachurch versus a small church, which is if you have a pastor of a small church where something happens, they have 100 or 200 people in the church. He doesn't have a vast social platform, a YouTube channel, but you have these megachurch pastors like I mean, it's a loss. Like it's a real like spiritual loss is grief. And like the people that I talk to, like if their pastor, if they experience pain because of their pastor at a megachurch, like that was a profound loss that took a lot of time, sometimes years of therapy to work through because these guys are the entire church. I mean, when Driscoll left Mars Hill, the church dissolved instantly. Like
Yeah.
15 campuses instantly were gone because he was the whole church. Like he could
Yeah.
not be replaced. They tried and couldn't do it. So I think that that's one of the it's kind of a house of cards with these guys. It puts a lot of pressure on the pastor, and I think that that can lead to issues.
Yeah. I agree. Your book is full of accounts of personal stories of people that were directly impacted by experiences with unhealthy leaders and systems in the megachurch world. I mean, if someone's gonna look for a book to read, that this is not a dry book. This is you're following people's stories, which I think is something that's really powerful. So these are real people. This isn't just a book of like data, but like we're meeting some people. And I found that really, really powerful as you were planning for these interviews and deciding who you want to talk to and making your list and then meeting people. Did it end up being different than you thought it would? Like, what surprised you in these conversations, or did it go exactly the way you thought?
No, it was very, very different than the way I thought it would. So the original idea I had for the book was like, we're going to do 13 chapters, and each chapter is going to be a different kind of harm that you experience in a megachurch.
Oh,
It,
wow.
it it became very clear very quickly that the book wanted to go in a different direction, and it was all driven by people's stories. And I think that from the beginning, that was always going to be the engine of the book was the personal impact of people. Because, I mean, I think megachurches have been reported on. There have been even while I was reporting this book, there were half a dozen documentaries that came out about toxic megachurches. But what I really wanted to do to differentiate this project was to find people and really give them the microphone because that's what you don't get in a megachurch. You have no voice, you have no platform. And one of the women interviewed in the book, she even says if you go to someone individually, if you go to a pastor and you say, this is what I experienced, this is the hurt I experienced, it's so easy for them to dismiss you because that's just your individual experience. And look, there's 10,000 other people here who are thriving at this church. The only way to do it, she said, is to raise the voice of the collective. And so that's what I hope this book does, is to show that there is a collective of people who've experienced profound hurt at large churches for a lot of different reasons. But it was important for me from the start that they had the platform because like these guys have had the platform for so long and you just don't have any influence at a large church. Your pastor doesn't know your name. I put in the book that, I mean, the hard truth is you could drop dead and your pastor wouldn't know at one of these large churches
Yeah.
because there's other churches for that stuff, but not these. And so I'm glad you picked up on that. And I appreciate that because I just wanted to hand them the microphone for a bit because I think that that's where the power comes from.
I listened to an interview that Scott McKnight did. Scott writes like a book every week, every time he turns around, he's written a new book. But somebody was asking him about megachurches. And Scott has become more and more like, I just don't know that I mean, some good things can happen in them, but I just don't think they're the way to go. And
Mhm.
he did say, who's going to preach at your funeral? And will they even know
Mm.
you? Was that person's going to know you? And
Yeah.
I mean that's just one thing that is a problem. And the person that was interviewing him,
Mm.
is connected to a megachurch. And I think they never really thought that most people that go to church don't have the relationship I have with
Yeah.
the main preaching pastor.
Yeah.
Like they so the if she falls over dead, yes, that person
Yeah.
knows her and but for most people that are there, I think it's something they maybe haven't considered, and it's so sad. It's
That's
so
yeah. That is really powerful to think about. What a question. I mean, these churches, they just delegate the idea of community into small groups. That's the whole point. I mean, you go in these churches and they're just pushing small groups because that's the only way to find a community in a church this big. Because I mean, it was a really interesting reporting experience that has like an introvert who'd rather sit at home and read than go talk to people face to
yeah.
face. It was kind of a dream because you just kind of float into these churches and then you float back out and no one shakes your hand and you don't have to talk to anyone and you can go to half dozen churches and never speak to another soul. But they're pushing small groups on you because that's the only way to find community. And that is real community. And, it can be a very fulfilling community, but is your small group leader going to be the one to preach at your funeral? Because that's the community that you get in a really large church. And I was just really fascinated by that as a writer, which is I think that has a lot to say about what we look for in community these days, especially post-COVID in like a fractured, like social media first environment. Like, what does the idea of community mean? I think that has really changed. And I think these churches are really reflective of it.
Yeah. So one of the people that you had conversations with several was attorney Boz Chivijan. I looked like you had several conversations with him.
Love Buzz.
Boz is amazing.
Love
He
Buzz.
has such an interesting story. But
I
here's
know.
what I found really fascinating about your conversation with him was Boz communicating how his his role as he sees it in this problem
Mm,
and what he can do and how he can bring influences change his idea of what he can do and the different places things that he's been a part of from uh teaching at Liberty and being someone who taught somebody how to be an attorney. After he worked in, the public sector for a while, he's like, I'm going to teach people that want to go to law school. That's going to be my thing. I can't even
mhm.
imagine. I haven't even asked him how what did it do to his brain to be at Liberty at the end? And when he was like,
Oh
no, I
man.
just can't. I cannot.
I
I
know.
can't. I mean, I think that part of this is sort of like, leave me alone and I'll leave you alone because
Mhm.
I, I'm going to do my job and
Yeah.
we're just going to do this thing.
Yeah.
Um, but then, he started Grace as a way
Mhm.
to like help people who want resources to make their churches better and to
Yeah.
do independent third-party investigations. To moving to like, no, I'm going to sue the churches.
Yeah.
Tell me
They
about
had
those
they just
conversations and sort of what he said.
so the way he put it to me was, I know I'm a unique bird, and I think he is a unique bird, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I think there's the obvious family history with him that makes him so interesting, but he's just the work he does is so important, and his his willingness to be candid about it and transparent about it is so important. Like, just I talked to him on Zoom, and we did an initial interview, and I immediately knew I needed to meet him. So like I flew across the country on a lark just to see if he would go to lunch with me. And it was like the best lunch I've ever had because he's so great. And he's telling me about like all the like his personal life, and DeLand, Florida, where he lives, is this cool little town in Florida. And he's just wearing shorts and drinking tea under an umbrella and talking about
Yeah.
the epidemic of pastoral abuse. And I'm like, thank God you're doing this work, because like the way he described it was so much of the attention was focused on pastoral abuse in the Catholic Church. No one was equipped to do this in the Protestant Church. And so the ability to, seek accountability through civil litigation, it was the only way to do it. And even actually, what's interesting, when I started this book, so the Robert Morris story broke in the middle of my writing this. And so I had to rewrite a big part of it. And at the time, the thought was that there was no way to hold Robert Morris criminally accountable
Yeah.
for the sexual abuse of Cindy Clemisher back in the 80s. So I had that in the book that, Boz had connected with Cindy because the only way that she could seek accountability was through the civil courts. That changed. They found a way to charge him criminally, and that's why he's in jail
Yeah.
right now. But civil litigation, suing these churches is in so many places the only way to get accountability, because in so many states it's not illegal for a pastor to do this stuff. And that was I thought the most powerful part of the conversation with him was that was when he said, as an attorney, if I do this with a client, I will lose my license. If I was a doctor and I did this with a patient, I would go to jail,
Yeah.
nevertheless lose my license. But as a pastor, there's no card you have to carry. There's no license you have to have. There's no board you have to go before. You design your own checks and balances. You choose your own, accountability partners that watch over you. And so you determine your whole accountability. And yeah, I don't know. I just love Buzz. I could go on and on about him, but his work is so important. And
Yeah.
I,
And
to
he put his finger on something important that was like, they're gonna listen to money. I
right.
mean, he didn't make
It's
that
the only
system,
way.
but like that if you want to upset the system and get someone to pay attention,
Yeah.
their pocketbook,
Yeah. He tell
their
he
insurance company saying, we will not insure you if you don't get your act together.
yeah. I mean, I had told him in one part of the conversation, like I could sense some discomfort maybe with clients who feel like the only way to seek accountability is to sue them financially. And my favorite quote from him was when he said,
I
if someone comes
underline
up to
this.
me, yeah, if someone comes up to me and says, I'm going to sue this church for money, I tell them, damn right you are. 'Cause what else do you want from me? Like, it's the only way to seek
Yeah.
accountability is to go after them financially. So, yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I had
They're
asked him
like,
toward
you're
the
only in it
end,
for the money. Sure.
of, of course she's in it for the money. Like, that's the only way to seek
Why should she
accountability.
have to
You got a
pay her
problem
own
with that?
therapy bills?
Exactly.
Why should
Like,
she have to carry this? Yeah.
yeah. And so he said, you got a problem with that? But like I can tell like he does have to walk people through it, because there is a discomfort with the perception that you're only in it for the money, or you're
Yeah.
just doing this church for a settlement or whatever. And that is so not the spirit of what he does. But it
Yeah.
is important because it's the only way in so many of these churches. So, I mean, I
I
had,
love that he has an intake person that like
yeah,
gets it. Like not, I mean, your first interaction isn't probably going to be boss. It'll be somebody that
yeah.
understands things that trauma. And isn't it interesting that we have seen at least a little bit of a theme of people that have gone through being harmed, being like, I think I'm going to become an attorney. I'm going to go to law school. I saw that in Jen Lyle went to law school.
Mm, yeah.
And I think Katie Roberts, who you talked
Hmm.
to, she also who's working part-time for Boz, it seems like,
Hmm.
her like one way I can bring some sort of accountability and advocate for justice is through the legal system. I think that's really interesting.
I think it's interesting. I think it's powerful too, because that to me shows that people are interested in really looking at what accountability means in a large church, and that it's no longer good enough for you to hold yourself accountable and for you to put a little group of men around you that's going to hold yourself accountable and they're your friends and buddies, but like actual legal accountability has been the thing that's always been missing from these churches. And yeah, I toward the end of our conversation with Boz, I had said to him something like, it kind of feels like you're angrier than you used to be, because I've read former interviews with you from 10, 15 years ago, and you just talk differently. And he pushed back on that. He's like, I don't think I'm angry. But then as he kept talking, he was getting angry about it. And how could you not, like, righteously angry about it?
Yeah,
Because like
there's a reason for it.
he has sat at the table with, victims of Ravi Zacharias and Bill Hybels and Robert Morris, and he said the pastors never show. They're never there. They send their attorney and they never show. And so I'm glad we have someone who's angry about it and who's doing such important work.
Yeah, I think I want to tell people like, did you read this article? Did you see who is representing the victim? You know that means something terrible happened.
Right.
You know if Boz is there,
Right. Yeah.
the person on the other side is the bad guy. You
Right.
know that, right? Like I say this with a little like personal interest in like I had Boz on retainer for a brief time. I got deposed for a lawsuit and I was like, I want Boz to sit next to me.
Mm.
So I got deposed and Boz came in with me and everybody's like introducing, all the attorneys are introducing themselves to each other. One of the Ramsey attorneys is like, Boz, I, she was like gushing over it. Like, I have been wanting to meet you for so long and I've heard about
Oh
your work.
my
And I'm like,
gosh.
then what? Then you know, you are working for the bad guy. You are working for the
Asking for
bad
his
guy.
autograph.
There was a really funny moment at the end of that deposition where they're like, "Hey, can you read this message that you sent to the plaintiff?" Yeah, I think they thought they were going to embarrass me.
Mm.
And I was like, "Okay, I'll read it." And in it had said, "I really feel like these attorneys, the ones that were deposing me right there that I was reading, like they're at some point they're going to realize they're working for a bad person and like, will they quit?"
Mm.
They asked me to read that. Did they ask me to read it out loud? Maybe I did. I don't remember. Whatever happened, I read it and they're like, they asked me to like comment on it. And I was like, I I guess I was wrong. You didn't quit. It was
We
a
got
fantastic
you.
moment. Yeah. So,
Yeah. I mean, that I'm really sorry that happened to you. Gosh, that's really maddening. And I'm
yeah.
also not surprised, but I just think he is such an interesting person and is doing such important work. And so many of his quotes stuck with me. I think of them a
Yeah.
lot. And the one that I think really summarizes the book in the end is I don't even know if it made it into the book, but he said when he talks to people who are scared to come forward out against a large system or a megachurch pastor, what he tells them is they don't have as much power as you think. Like
Hmm.
a big part of what they do is to make you feel like they have a lot of power, but your pastor doesn't control you. They're not
Yeah.
your boss. They're not your family. They're not the legal system. What power do they actually have over you? You're attached to your church. You might be attached to your pastor personally, and that's all real and valid. But and it can wound you to leave a church. I have felt that. We've all felt that. It could be a grieving process to leave a church. But at the end of the day, I mean, that's kind of why the title of the book is what it is. Like, how much power do these guys actually have?
The
And
smoke machine.
that's what I really found really inspiring in the work that he does is that these victims who have experienced really profound pain from these churches, they get their power back. And I think realizing that is part of it.
Yeah. What would you say? So there's a big part of your book that sort of talks about this faux accountability restoration process, which is just so maddening. So
Mhm.
I want to tee this up for you like a real softball pitch to you. I want you to say, what would you say to the person that's like, I'm sure there's some robust accountability system in place for the leaders of these mega churches. They're accountable for certainly, Scott. They're accountable. Please speak to that.
Well, I mean, if you look at their websites, you'll see that they list a bunch of people who are holding them accountable, but the truth is they choose their own friends and networks to hold them accountable. So there's some churches in the book that he uses examples of this, but there's a megachurch pastor in Jacksonville, Stovall Weems, who crashed out big a few years ago, and he was part of this association of related churches. And he gave an interview on local TV where they asked him that very question, and he came out and said, I have two systems of checks and balances, and I choose them. Those are nominated by me. And so, if you're a megachurch pastor with a high net worth and a church network that you have built or that you're a member of, who are you going to look to hold you accountable? It's going to be the men that you know, and it's always going to be men. It's going to be the men that you know, it's going to be the men in your network. And so then the question just becomes, is that accountability? Is that real accountability? If you're friends with the men who are holding you accountable, are they going to be able to truly hold you accountable if something happens at the end of the day? Are they even in your state? Like, this was something that was so interesting to me that I learned is that a lot of these groups, so a pastor may have like 5 to 7 men in his group that hold him accountable, but they might be on the other side of the country. Like, there's a megachurch in Washington that's in the book. One of their guys was in Texas. And so, like, what does that actually mean if he's not involved in the church? He doesn't go to the church. He's not even in your time zone. Like he's just going to be called in on a phone call. Like if
Yeah.
something happens, like he doesn't know the ins and outs of the church. So, and then of course there's no licensing board that has to hold you accountable. There's no external accountability beyond the church whatsoever, especially as megachurches are non-denominational now. There's no even like denominational accountability, which Boz was clear to point out is not real accountability
Yeah. Yeah.
and does not matter, which we've seen in the
Yeah.
SBC. But they don't even have that. And so no, I don't think it's real accountability. And I think there's lots of examples of that. I mean, pastors would dispute that. And I'm sure there's examples out there of pastors being held accountable. But I mean, so Driscoll is, I think, the best example of this, where Mars Hill really, really worked to hold him accountable. Long reports, so much evidence. The Rise and Fall of Mars Hill podcast documents all of this. But at the end of the day, he just decided he didn't want to accept it. And so he resigned instead of going
Yeah.
through their discipline process. The church dissolved. He moved to Arizona and started a new church. So
Yeah.
even if there is a system of accountability, if you don't want it, you don't have to accept it. You could just move
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
start a new
You like,
church.
I guess I'm not going to be in this denomination anymore. We
Yeah.
saw that with a local pastor in the Nashville area that, was going through some disciplinary stuff. And then they just decided it seemed like they didn't really want to, they kind of didn't want to do it anymore. Like,
Yeah. I mean, Robert Morris, his son was set to inherit Gateway Church. He resigned and started a new church,
yeah.
Passage Church. I mean, you can start a church like you can start any sort of business. And it's so easy. I mean, Amy, you could start a megachurch this afternoon if you want to and make it non-denominational, and you don't have to have any accountability. And you could do the conference
Well,
circuit.
yeah. And I
And
live
then if
in
something
this
happens,
area where people really love megachurches. So I probably
I mean,
could.
you live in the perfect spot for it, I
I
have to
need
say.
a, so as I was reading, I'm explaining your book to my husband, and I'm like, there's a bad guy in it. And he's like, wait, is this like fiction? I'm like, no, no, this is nonfiction.
There's a bad guy.
This is a character that kind of is all over this. And you know where I'm going with the associated and related churches.
Mhm.
And this is a person from Church of the Highlands, Pastor Chris Hodges.
Yeah.
And I don't know if people realize this, what all he has touched and
Yeah.
all of the things that he is involved in. And I even wonder if the typical person that goes to Church of the Highlands is aware of all the things in the news that they're told to pay no attention to,
Yeah.
or that, Satan is trying to destroy his
Yeah.
ministry. But one of the main things he does is he has this, air quotes, restoration ministry that he does for his buddies. Please explain to
Yeah.
my listeners sort of how this thing works that Chris Hodges has done. Is he still doing? I'm not sure.
Yeah. So Chris Hodges is now he's listed as the founding pastor of Church of the Highlands in Alabama, excuse me, and which is by some measure, the second largest church in the US if you go off the Outreach 100 big church list. So they
Yeah.
claim 60,000 people a week across 25 campuses across Alabama and Georgia. They have conquered the state of Alabama when it comes to churches. And I grew up in Birmingham. Church of the Highlands was not as big a deal then. There were half a dozen churches that were bigger, and now they are the church brand in the state of Alabama.
Yeah.
Massive. Hodges is their pastor, and last year he stepped aside, handed off the day-to-day pastoral, like day-to-day pastoring responsibilities. He's now founding pastor, and he's doing that so he can focus on the other non-pastoring things, primarily Highlands College, which is
Yeah.
their college, which is exploding. But
Googled him yesterday, and the first thing that came up in my Google results was a link to a YouTube with Dave Ramsey speaking at their
yeah,
college.
yeah, Ramsey speaks there regularly at the
Yeah.
church. He speaks on Sunday mornings. And so what Chris Hodges has said before is that one of the things he wants to be known for is the practice of pastoral restoration. And pastoral restoration is, he didn't invent this, it's been around a long time. But basically, if a pastor commits some sort of moral failure, which is the phrase that gets bandied about a lot, often it's an extramarital affair, but sometimes it's much, much worse.
That is
They
criminal. Yeah.
Sometimes it's criminal. I mean, Robert Morris was he stepped aside for a moral affair and it was sexual assault, sexual abuse of a child. And
Hmm.
so you step aside for a period, you go through an internal process of accountability. It's 100% internal, it is not transparent. And this group of accountability guys, it's often 5 to 7 men, choose what that looks like. So you step aside for usually it's a couple of years, but there is no set number because everyone who goes through this process has their own kind of bespoke restoration process that is determined by the men doing it. You read books, you go through counseling, you go to conferences, and then after about a year or two, you kind of slowly work your way back to the pulpit. you're under the umbrella of a different church. So Church of the Highlands has brought in pastors from other churches. They have put them on staff. There are men in the book who I cite who have gone through this process who had allegations, very serious allegations against them at other churches. Highlands brought them on staff. They did not communicate to the congregation or even to other staff members what these men had done and what they were there to do. It was very opaque. And so over 2 years, they worked their way back in paid positions. And then they are either brought on full time at the end of that or they're released back to another church. So it's a completely opaque process. It's not transparent. You don't know what they've done. I don't even know how many men Church of the Highlands has brought on to do this because they don't talk about it. There is a culture of silence at these large churches where this is a highly, highly kept secret. But I have a feeling it's way more than we realize because so Johnny Hunt, the former president of the SBC, so when the allegations came out against him a couple of years ago that he had sexually assaulted a woman, and they were going through that whole process, he was restored, quote unquote, by four megachurch pastors. And in the video, if you watch the video where they're talking about it, they note that Johnny Hunt himself had personally restored over 400 pastors on his own back to ministry. I mean, Hodges has said in a video he gets multiple calls a month to do this. So I
400.
Johnny Hunt, yeah, who has gone through the restoration process twice now. He's up to two because of allegations against him. So it is, I think it is a pervasive problem. Boz used the word epidemic of pastoral abuse, and I think, yeah, it's just very icky and gross and opaque. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, Robert Morris was one of Chris Hodges's overseers. I mean, they were close friends, and he's in jail right now. And so
Yeah.
I had people in the book tell me that one of the things he likes to say is, you are the company you keep. And there's a pastor on Highland staff, Dino Rizzo, who was kind of Hodges' first restoration process. He was at a church in Louisiana and he stepped down due to a quote moral failing. And it took 2 years to bring him back. And then when he brought him back, Hodges said, we need more of these. Like that was the first one. And he didn't want pastors to be cast aside. But yeah, I don't know. I'm interested in your thoughts on this, Amy, of how this strikes you as a
I mean, it's
practice.
just gross. I mean, like, I don't love the fact that I could be going to a church, and of course, I'm going to default to trusting the leadership, that they would bring in, even somebody to be the youth, work with the youth, that is only there because of allegations of sexual misconduct
Hmm.
at their other church.
Yeah.
But now I'm supposed to try, like, that's just gross. It is absolutely gross. And to frame it as this sort of Christ-like demonstration of forgiveness is, I think, is anti-Christ, honestly, because it does not feel like accountability. It feels like just, making it easier for people, being sort of their apologists and like, this is not good. I mean,
Yeah.
I feel like there shouldn't be a question about that. Like, but
Yeah.
when somebody who has spiritual authority tells you you're reading it wrong, it messes with your brain, right? And I feel for the people that do not know. There's no transparency. And then I
Hmm.
also feel, and I think you've touched on this in like your book and maybe in some conversations that you've had, is that when somebody is fully absorbed into a megachurch system, almost every part of their life is touched by that. And so let's say you find out something terrible happened, like your youth pastor is an abuser.
Hmm.
And now you thought for sure if they knew, somebody would do something, and you tell them. And you find out, oh no, they knew and they're doing nothing. Now you have a choice. You stay and figure out maybe you were wrong and hope things are okay, or you leave and lose your church. You lose your friends. You
Hmm.
lose the place that you did aerobics or Zumba or something.
Yes.
You
Yes.
lose your kids are going to school at the
Yeah.
Christian school. You lose your kids' youth group. Like it is not that easy. So I am not I feel terrible for those people in that situation that are like, I will lose all of my social
Yeah.
support network and I will still live in a community surrounded by people that think I made the wrong decision
Hmm.
or that I am the enemy of them if I speak up.
Hmm. Yeah. Totally. I mean, that I think that is exactly right. And I think that is that you hit on the big trait of a megachurch. What differentiates it from a small church is that it reaches into all these areas of your life. And so if you lose it, you don't just lose your church, you lose all of it. I mean, you lose your friend group, your kids' friend group, their school potentially, the hoodie that you wear, the podcast you listen to, your gym, your marriage counselor, might be your job. Like that is, I think, the real risk here as people get absorbed into these large churches. And I have been there. That has been me, which
Yeah.
is that the pain gets compounded all the more if you have to leave due to something. And I just think that's unique to a large church situation and it leads to a lot of hurt.
Yeah, I think it's why I have so much empathy for people that are struggling with whether to stay or leave in a
Yeah.
situation like that. I mean,
Yeah.
it's easy from the outside to say leave.
Right.
And I do want to say that in some ways. I know Boz has said something like I was like, if you found out a church did NDAs, he'd be like, leave now. But he also, there's another part of him that's like, but I know why
Yeah.
you wouldn't. I
Yeah.
know
It's hard.
why it would be hard. And so, and also I think it's hard to see it. You don't want it when you don't want to see it, you know?
Yeah.
You
And
just don't.
there's a guy in the book who left Church of the Highlands after some painful experiences and he lives in North Alabama and he drives by two of their locations every day. I mean, if you live in a place with lots of locations, that's the other thing is you see it as a visual reminder. I talked to a woman in the book who goes back to Florida. She kind of crashed out of Bayside Church in Florida and she sees the stickers on the backs of cars. Like you just see it everywhere. And that makes it even harder too, is that you really can't escape the influence of these churches and these communities.
You can't get away from it. We haven't touched on this yet, but like, I mean, the subtitle of your book is drawing a direct line from megachurches to Christian nationalism. And I think it is very interesting. You talk about this like study or whatever, or survey of megachurches and people saying that no, our church does not engage in political things.
Mhm.
And I would love to hear sort of how you have pushed back and sort of how you've read that data and
Yeah.
have a different reading and explanation on that.
Yeah. So really the only hard data that we get on megachurches is this survey that comes out every 5 years from the Hartford Institute for Religion Research. And the new one is about to come out. I'm very excited any day now. But for the book, I used the one from 2020. And in that survey, they asked pastors of megachurches, it's all self-reported, but it is good data. And they asked them, does your church take political action? And the overwhelming majority of them say no. And they list these examples of what political action looks like. And the pastors say yes or no for all of them. And I think it's like the most extreme versions of political action. It's like lobbying elected officials, holding like get out the vote drives, attending a protest or a march, organizing groups to discuss politics. These pastors say, no, we don't do those things. And so then the subhead in the report says megachurches overwhelmingly avoid political action. Great. Okay. Well, I think there's different kinds of political power. And there's hard political power, which looks like that. And we see lots of megachurches these days having hard political power, especially with this administration and how easy it is for them to get access.
Hmm.
But then there's soft political power, which I think is much more common. And if you just listen to the way these guys talk and the things that they say and the friends that they keep, and then just the feeling of being surrounded in a community, I think it's much more common to experience soft political power. I mean, joking about liberals, joking about West Coast liberals, or like trans kids, or drag queen story hour. These just like flippant little jokes, these flippant little comments that get played off for a laugh. To me, that's a political action. I think
Yeah.
it others people in the congregation. I think it's intended to other and to divide people in the congregation. And I think that is extremely common because I have seen it and heard it my whole life in large churches. And I know you have, and a lot of listeners have as well. So I think that's really common. But also, like, I think the number offhand is something like 14% of megachurches take some of these really hard political actions. That's also a ton of churches. Like,
I mean, you
even
think
like
of the
the
number of people in one of those megachurches.
so if the I have the numbers in the book, I don't remember them offhand, but like if the minimum attendance for a megachurch is 2,000 people, and there's 1,700 megachurches in the US, and 14% of those churches are taking hard political action, do the math, and like that's hundreds of thousands of people in some cases that are distributing voter guides in megachurches or lobbying elected officials. All of this is legal. And now the IRS changed its guidance this summer after I locked the manuscript, which was unfortunate, which was that you can now openly lobby for political candidates from the pulpit. The Johnson Amendment is no more. And so like the barriers are just crashing down rapidly for the political actions that these churches can take. And of course they're going to take them because it's in their interest to take them. So I would push back hard against the narrative
Yeah.
that megachurches are not political. I mean, some sure, a lot of them aren't. They're not going to get into it, but a lot of them are. And it can be hard to detect it. It doesn't show up in a survey, but if you go there Sunday after Sunday, you feel it.
Yeah, I felt it. I've grown up in evangelical churches and we had voter guides. The Minnesota Family Council,
Yeah.
we had a whole stack of them that we could take and it was pretty understood who we were supposed to vote for. Like, we won't tell you who to vote for, wink wink, but
Yeah.
you know who to vote for. So, I mean, I think there was this at least a little bit of this restraint of like we won't specifically say, we'll just say all the things around
Yeah.
it so that you
Right.
know. But I am super curious about the next study and maybe the one after it that comes out because I feel like there's more and more pastors that are like, of course I'm overtly doing it. This
Hmm.
is this is my job to do. I mean, I've seen the clips of the pastors laughing hysterically with each other, Josh Howerton and his buddies, saying, "What would you say to someone who says you shouldn't be political or talk?" And they like just start busting up laughing about how ridiculous that is.
Yeah.
Like, and they are proud about
Yeah.
very specifically saying you cannot vote for a Democrat and be a Christian. They're like demonic.
Yeah.
And they're like feel like they're being unapologetic and so brave for saying that. So I feel like maybe it's moving more overt and less like why should I apologize for it, you know? I don't know. What do you
Yeah.
think?
I think that's true. And so for the last chunk of the book, I spent the 18 months leading up to the election going to some of these big churches just to kind of take the temperature. And I spent some time in Arizona and went to Driscoll's church. I mean, that was the one that I found was really alarming, was how much his rhetoric has changed since he was in Seattle. And I spoke to someone who really studied him when he was at Mars Hill in Seattle just to ask her how much has he really changed? Because it strikes me that he is much more aggressive politically now and
Yeah.
like openly telling people he's voting Republican. He's not being coy, he's not being cheeky about it. He's telling them to vote Republican. And I sat in that auditorium and his sermon was called Should a Christian Be a Nationalist or a Globalist, which was just crazy to me. And he was like railing against foreign aid and the UN and like all the far right talking points. He just ticked through. He was literally reading off a piece of paper, just like ticking through them. He is desperate to go viral on the internet. He is constantly goading and baiting people. And I think that gets to what you just said, which is that the environment has made it much more comfortable for him to do that. And now where he lives, certainly like Scottsdale versus Seattle, like it's much more easy for him to do it in that environment. But I totally agree. I think you'll see more of it. I mean, why not? The whole political system is set up right now to privilege these guys. I mean, Driscoll went from being a megachurch pastor in the corner of the US in Seattle that didn't have a ton of cultural influence outside of evangelicalism to meeting JD Vance backstage
Yeah.
at a rally leading up to the election. I mean, power, access and power. He got it and he's going to
Yeah,
get
and
more of
I'm
it.
also seeing people that used to be afraid to be associated with Driscoll.
Hmm.
They aren't anymore. The people
Yeah.
that had deleted old tweets interacting with him when he was like, "Oh no, he's a bad guy.
Oh,
People shouldn't
interesting.
know that I was listening to him." That now they're all like proud of it.
Interesting. Yeah.
And there it is. The shift has I don't understand it. I don't and I have seen a little crack in this with uh some of the super super right-wing Christian talkers that have been talking about the danger of the new apostolic reformation, dealing with the fact
Yeah.
that some of the people that are supporting their favorite politicians are connected with it. And it's causing their brains to break a little bit. Like,
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting. Another super
Mm.
interesting thing happening in the news. Did you see the Foreign Agents Registration Act for filing, the FARA
Okay.
filing from a company that was formed to lobby on behalf of Israel?
No.
And they did a filing. I should send you there's been several articles about it now. And they included in it their pitch deck of what they wanted to do. They wanted geofence megachurches in the Southwest to specifically target them with ads.
Wow.
Megachurches. It was megachurches on the list.
Yeah, I
Christchurch of the
mean,
Valley. I mean, and
Dream City
influencers.
Church. Yeah, Dream City
Those
Church
were
had to be
on
on
there.
there.
They were they literally listed them as we want to specifically target the people that are in this building and then be able to send ads to anybody that were in these church buildings.
That is fascinating. And so, I mean, I went to Dream City Church
And
last
the church,
October.
I just want to say the church didn't ask for this. They don't get to opt in or out of it.
Mhm.
But that a foreign government thinks these people are the ones that would be the most helpful to our cause.
I mean, it's kind of brilliant in a dark and scary way because I think they're probably right. I mean, I
And they
went,
had a list of influencers that they thought might help them.
wow.
Tim Tebow was on the list. Mark Driscoll was on their list.
Wow. Goodness. I mean, so Dream City Church, I went there. That's Charlie Kirk's church. It's a mega church.
Hmm.
It's one of the biggest
Yeah.
churches in the US. It's in Phoenix, has lots of locations. A few weeks before the election, I was there, and it was a pro-Israel rally. It was the title of the sermon was The Bible, the Ballot, in Israel. And it was a 35-minute message about US support for Israel. It was a political speech. And there were people carrying yard signs out of the building that they had picked up there that said vote no on prop whatever. Like they were giving out political signs. There were people in Trump shirts, obviously, and they sang God Bless America. I mean, it was an absolute political rally through and through. So that is not surprising and kind of sadly brilliant for that to be happening because I think that's probably going to work.
Yeah, when we get off this, I will email you the link because I think it will be interesting to add to
Please do.
your file of information. As we wrap this up, I would love for you to say sort of to the church, the person who hasn't given up on the Christian church, and maybe even the evangelical Christian church, and says, I believe all these things are happening and it's bad. Tell me what voices I should listen to and what should I look out for that if I want to have a healthy church and I want to look more like Jesus and less like trying to find political power.
Mm,
What
that's a
voices
great,
are like, what kind of things should they listen to or pay attention to?
that's a great question. I mean, what I learned in the reporting for this book, first of all, which I think is important, is that everyone's journey is different. And so it's hard to kind of prescribe, broadly what makes for a healthy faith experience or a faith community or a church because like if you need to leave your church, you need to leave your church. If you want to stay, like that's completely a personal decision. And for some people in the book, like they ended up leaving their church, but they held on to the pieces. They don't go
Mhm.
to church anymore, maybe, but they still believe. Like it's so kind of messy and complicated and sad. But I think that there's no way forward in a healthy church if they don't take accountability seriously, external accountability, not internal accountability. Like it that is an oxymoron. It is not a real thing. It doesn't work. I I I don't know. Like I think there's something inherently contradictory about a megachurch. I think that these churches exist to look so much like the world and popular culture, and then you get in them and they tell you you can't look like the world and popular culture. There's a
Yeah.
fundamentalist core of steel, is how one person put it. So, I mean, it's hard for me to see what a healthy really large church would look like. Not to say that, that's not a valid place to go to church or that they don't exist, but it would start with the pastor for me and what accountability looks like. And, you know, again, like what kind of community are we seeking these days? What does it mean to be in community? Is it a group of people you see once a week? Is it and then that's it? And that's your community. And then on Sundays, you sit with 10,000 people. I had been in that, and that community did not work for me. It works great for a lot of people, and that's fantastic. But, you know, I would just so if I was going to go back to church, because I walked away from church, when I was younger, if I was going to go
Mhm.
back, it would start with those things. Like, who is the pastor? What does the accountability structure look like? How seriously do they take it? How much money is this person making? Like, that's a big sticking point for me. And what kind of community am I seeking here? And yeah, I don't know. I have my own thoughts on like fundamentalism and evangelicalism, which I'll save, but
Yeah.
Yeah, it's what about you, Amy? I'm so curious. You've had so many conversations with people. Like, where does that leave you with this question of like, what are the healthy structures for a church now?
Well, I think if you're going to be in any community, you're going to need to be vulnerable. And so there's just no way to protect yourself against all things. So you're going to have to do your best to find out what the red flags are and what the
Yeah,
non-negotiable things are that you're absolutely sure you cannot handle and you will
yeah,
not put yourself in again. And then what isn't. And what's just a human interaction issue and somebody that just had a bad day
hmm,
and somebody that you just would not want to be in a faith community with who has authority over you. And so that for me, for our family, it's looked like we're not official members of a church because we don't feel like we want to say something we can't in good conscience say, but we feel like we are still we regularly attend a church and we feel like this is our community and I feel like they love me and I care about them and I'm invested in
mm,
them, even though I haven't said some magic words about how, if I do the wrong thing, you could put me under church discipline, that sort of thing.
yeah,
That's how it has looked. And also, it looks like me saying, I'm not anxious about other people's church experience and whether they're in a building or not, and
mm,
how they are processing it. I think their old version of Amy was like, grew up super church, super evangelical. Like, of course, people need to be in the building, they need to be in the church, they need to be like,
yeah,
the pastor must be right. There must be some misunderstanding if somebody has a problem, like they didn't understand him right, and they probably were wrong themselves. That Amy doesn't exist anymore.
mm,
I'm open to hear someone say that pastor hurt me and believe them and
yeah,
not be worried about what that means about my faith
yeah,
and if I belong as a Christian or not. I don't know if that makes sense. Like people make, I've seen people do stupid things, and
hmm,
there are abusive people that are drawn to being leaders in churches, and I will always be on my guard against that a bit.
yeah,
But I try not to take it out on people that there's no evidence that they are that kind of person.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, really, one of the most surprising things about writing this book for me was the most enjoyable conversations I had really were with pastors. I was not expecting that, especially, with the posture that I had going into this
Yeah.
project. But I really left a lot of my conversations with them feeling good and fulfilled, and I enjoyed our conversation. And there's so many groups out there now that are devoted to survivors and religious abuse and spiritual abuse. Restored Voices Collective is one in the book.
I've
There's
met
a
many
group.
of those women. They're so awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, amazing. There's a group called I think the Post-Evangelical Collective, where it's a group of churches that are trying to find a way forward outside the strictures of fundamentalism. And I think that's great. I mean, I live in Portland, and so, it's not hard to find a church out here that is more inclusive and is,
Hmm.
trying to find a way forward outside of legalism. And, if I was going to go back, that's where I would have to go, is because I think that the fundamentalism is the problem. That
Yeah.
for so many people that leads to harm and pain, especially for women. And I don't think that can be emphasized enough, is like a church that doesn't put women in leadership positions, that's like a non-starter, like through and
Hmm.
through. That says so much about what they believe and what they think accountability means. So, yeah.
Yeah. I think what is good and true will rise to the top and stay, and what isn't, I mean, I don't have to protect an institution or a system.
Yeah.
I don't have to. But I used
Yeah.
to feel like I needed to do that.
Yeah. I mean, it's like what Boz said, they don't have as much power as you think, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this has been great. Thanks for stopping by the podcast. Thank you for writing the book. I'm really looking forward to seeing how people interact with it and hearing the other interviews that you do. So
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Thanks for what you do. This was really fun.
thanks, Scott.